the century is quite a long time ago, but periodically we're looking at 1948, 1967, 2000, 2005, 2006, and the most recent attacks which have killed more than 1,500 people, 2014. Now, the question which we'll be addressing is, are their actions by Israel, Hamas, Palestine justified? Who should be held accountable? And what is the solution for the conflict in Gaza, for Palestine, and for Israel? Before I continue with the rules, I'll call on our senior members of the Student for Law and Social Justice, which are outside. We have Quatela, who's doing his final year in laws. We have Kazimuro, who's a master's student. We have our senior ranking member, personality, who is the Secretary General for the Students for Law and Social Justice International. He is also all the other founding members of the Student for Law and Social Justice. To go through the rules first, as mentioned, are the actions by Israel, Hamas, Palestine justified? Who shall be held accountable? And what is the solution? These are the questions which each side needs to address. The context of each answer must not contain hate speech, racism, derogatory language that infringes the dignity of those people who are arguing or whom the debaters are arguing for or against. Each speaker will be given 5 minutes to present his or her argument. After that, a person from the opposing side, an assessor, or the debate master will have an objection or have a question for the person who just delivered his argument. That person needs to answer the question asked. Then he sits down, then the first speaker will rise, so forth. After both sides have concluded their argument, there will be a chance for the audience to ask questions or give opinions about the topic. Then lastly, the debate master will decide which side wins. The decision is based on a point system assessed by 2 assessors and a debate master. The final decision or judgment will include arbiter dictum, which is an opinion of the debate master. However, this opinion will not override the points the team have accumulated. The team with the most persuasive argument wins. We will start with Ms. Parsons, who is on the side of Palestine. Please present your argument.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today our team will be debating on the side of the Palestinians and the ongoing dispute against the Israelis. We will be arguing that the Palestinians' actions are in fact justified and are merely a retaliation to the brutal military actions of the Israelis. Moreover, that the beginning of this dispute can be rooted back to the actions of the Israelis themselves. Lastly, a solution will be proposed in which peace should rise. Our Senator David Norris quoted recently, Israel has become criminal and is using the Holocaust as justification grounds for their activities. My first point is that the Israeli violence is not justified, and this will be discussed in relation to the history of the dispute. Going back to the beginning, after the Holocaust, Britain gave Israel a portion of Palestine as they needed a home. Palestine, being hospitable, allowed the Israelis in, but thereafter they used force and attacking to gain their territory. Ilan Pappé, an Israeli historian, stated that the Israelis have created a myth of Palestine being a land without people in order for them to gain a state. Obviously, with the attack of their own territory, the Palestinians would not sit back as they were not happy, and they resisted. This can be compared to the apartheid. People are not just going to sit back and let their land be taken away. Children are being killed, families are being murdered, they were going to resist. They are in a state of helplessness and the UN aren't doing anything to help. In justifying the bombings that the Palestinians are doing, we don't deny that the Palestinians are using violence as a means of gaining territory or defending themselves. But the US are linked to Israel and are giving Israel $8.5 million daily towards their military, as opposed to Palestine, who have almost a non-existent military and 13 Israelis. In 2012, over 8 days, 174 Palestinians were killed as opposed to 6 Israelis, I'm sorry. In 2013, 8 Palestinian children were killed as opposed to no Israeli children being killed. And our current situation sits at, as of 7th of July to present, 1,886 Palestinians have been killed as opposed to 67 Israelis, 64 of which are soldiers in this died. My point being that most of the Palestinians that are being killed are in fact innocent children that are being bombed in their schools during school time when they are known to be at school. Innocent families who are sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. Civilians walking the streets, not our soldiers. I feel like we can no longer call this a war anymore, as it's a one-sided attack with the military forces that Israel do have, as opposed to a non-existent military that Palestine have with homemade bombs.
We will now open an objection from the opposite side. If you guys have an objection, we will have a question asked by the bench. Objection?
For some of the points that were made earlier had no substance or reference.
Which one are you bringing?
The points about clean and the not reference to where you got your.
There's statistics off the UN website. So I feel like that's what I was substantial.
Questions from the bench? You will have a question from Andy first.
Well, Speaker, in your presentation, you have alluded that the United Nations isn't doing anything about the whole Israel-Palestine debacle. I mean, what is really the role of the United Nations in the broader international spectrum of politics?
I feel like, okay, maybe I was a bit bold in my statement, nothing, because they have tried, but minimal means. They haven't completely infiltrated the Israeli war, and I feel like they haven't done enough. That was bold of me to say nothing, but they have done something.
Is Palestine a permanent member state of the United Nations? And what are the effects of that?
Yes. Regarding to the killing of innocent civilians, the Israeli government has argued that Hamas is using civilians as human shields. So they arguing that they deliberately tell them to stay when there's about to be an Israeli attack. And secondly, I also wanted to know, there's also been an argument from the Israelis that the reason that they attack some of these civilian facilities is that Hamas stores rockets in these facilities. I just wanted to know your opinion on that.
We actually researched that, and there was a claim by the Israelis that the Palestinians were storing ammunition in a school. In fact, that was past, that's no longer. They were merely storing it. The Israelis have illegal weapons, which they are storing. They do. And as for the human shield point, the Israelis, it's been, I can't remember where we read it, but we read that the Israelis were given directions, coordinates of a school 17 times. And they know that the schools in Palestine finish at 11 o'clock in the morning, or they're all out in the streets at 11 o'clock in the morning. And most of their
I want to know from you what progress has been made with regards to diplomatic talks. Also, when we look at the ceasefire that ended about 2-3 hours ago earlier this morning, and the failure for the two parties to come to an agreement, what is your opinion on that? What is your view on that?
There have been peace offerings from the Palestinian side negotiations from our side to compromise, and the Israelis will not give up any of their territory in order to get peace. So we have attempted, Palestine have attempted to negotiate peace. However, the Israelis will not budge on compromising at all.
Thank you, sir. Speaker one from.
I have a question for Mr. Watcher on this side, where he said that one of the statements was unfounded, for example, the killing of civilians. Mr. Watcher, are you suggesting that civilians are not being affected or dying as a result?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I just she didn't give reference to. She just didn't give reference to where she got that information. That's why.
So you were asking for the source?
Yes.
Alright.
We'll have your first speaker. Mr. Sachin Barbari.
Hi, I'm Sachin. I'm going to be arguing on behalf of Israel and the current situation due to tension. We noticed that as the proposing team didn't really give a definition or a solution to the problem, we don't even for them. We suggest that in terms of the conflict, that either we adopt a position of cohabitation between Israel and Palestine, as has been proposed numerous times from 1936 and 1967 to 68, 1947 and 1937, as been proposed in the history of the conflict, yet has, or we can suggest that either you guys accept cohabitation, or either way, Israel takes over Palestine. That's pretty much the solution. You accept peace and cohabitation for both people, or it's Israel's territory as is because, alright, moving on. The history of the conflict was one in which that after 1918 and the Ottoman Empire collapsed in World War I, the Allied powers of the Europeans and the Russians dictated a period of a space of land within Israel and Palestine to the Israelis, to the Jewish people, to which that they could call their own and have their own land. This was also advocated for a two-state solution, in which the existing the Severance Treaty, in which both the Zionists and Arabs, both the Zionist powers and the Arab powers signed. So this was an agreement. Although the treaty was not enacted, there was an agreement between the two powers that there would be a policy of cohabitation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. All right, we can follow this. In 1937, the Peel Committee again wanted to adopt a two-state solution. And this was a British-run solution in which both Arabs and the Israelis would adopt a period of policy of cohabitation. Once again, this was rejected by the Arab powers, in which the only solution was violence for the Arab powers. In 1947, again, this happened. Implements two-state solution. So carrying on. In 1949, Abraham Karak said, organized Arab attacks on the Jewish people within Palestine. So as you can see, that there's an occurring history of violence towards the Israelis from the Arabic solution, from the Arabic population. My point is, if peace cannot be reached, what else solution is there apart from more violence? Moving on. Okay. There's a long history. But in 1968, there was a policy adopted by the Arabic powers in power at the time called the Three No's, in which case there would be no, it was a PLO movement called the Three No's, in which this was in the Hamas charter, as we've seen, that there would be no concessions given to any of the Jewish people. Nothing at all. No negotiation, no land distribution, nothing. It was a period of policy of non-tolerance towards the Jewish in the Gaza. Okay. Moving in, as you can see, Hamas also adopted a pro-jihadist pro-jihadist structure towards the Israeli conflict, in which case there was a stance of no cooperation whatsoever. So my question I propose to everybody here is, what else is there to do? If countless attempts at peace and cohabitation have been rejected, what else is there?
Thank you, Sasha. You don't have an objection from our opposing side?
So in other words, you're justifying the inhumane treatment and the deprivation of certain resources, freedom, rights as a whole because of the past. Because if you're going to go on the past, then you can look at South Africa and say, well, because we deprived, because the white people deprived the black people of certain things, now we must do that, they must do that. Right?
I don't see the relevance there.
I do, because that's what your argument basically sounded like.
You just explain these for the
You said you were saying
The
you were trying to justify.
Yes, Sasha,
Hold on. You were trying to justify the violence with saying that in the past the Israelis were deprived of, what did you say?
I didn't say they were deprived. I said
Well, not as such, but.
the Israelis weren't deprived of anything. The Israelis were given land in
and
which
taken away.
land wasn't taken away from them. They were given land in which to settle on, the new Israel.
And then?
The Arab state. Do you want me to rearrange my whole argument again? I don't think I have time for that.
Sasha, thank you, sir. I think the question was, you cannot justify the killing of more than 5,000 people on historical, political context. You cannot do that. And if you do, now I'm not finished. If you do, is that legitimate? Are you putting your argument across as that is legitimate?
No, the legitimacy comes from the fact that there has been numerous peace talks, that the Israelis do not wish for conflict.
Okay, so I'll have a question from you, and I'll have a question from the bench. We are looking at the 2014 conflict in Gaza right now, and where 63 Israelites are killed, 1,500 are killed in Palestine. Where's the proportionality there? Where do we say as Israel, our means to attain whatever motive we seeking to attain are proportionate to the means that we're using, such as bombing schools, bombing facilities, bombing households? Is that proportional?
It's not, but at the same time, you have to say, if you're going to reject peace, the only option is violence. That's the only option they have now. There's no other means.
We'll take questions from the bench.
Speaker, in your presentation, you keep on emphasizing the idea of the treaties that have been launched, treaties that have been proposed actually, and they've been rejected quite a number of times. I mean, can't we look at the rejection part? Why is it that these treaties have been rejected? Are they authentic? Are you honest? Are you honest enough to the public at large, to the international sphere of politics? Are you honest?
In the sense that the treaties are one-sided, or
You'd remember that the idea, the Israel's ill behavior is very old. And I hope you are familiar with the war between the Israel and the Iraq as well. This is not the first time. Israel in the international arena is known to be very, very aggressive.
I think what you have to understand is that Israel is a lone Jewish state surrounded by Arabic nations.
So what are you saying, that we should condone and accept this behavior?
Not necessarily condone and accept, just that the Israeli population want to have their land and just live their lives.
They living out range.
If there was a peace settlement agreed, I'm pretty sure both sides would accept that. So you just need to arrive at peace, essentially.
Say the Israelis want their
Yes, you do know that for 8 years now, that Gaza has been under blockade. An air, sea, and a land blockade. So nothing gets in Gaza, nothing gets out of Gaza. Most of the population of Gaza is unemployed. The health service it's terrible. It's a mess because they can't bring in products. They can't bring in those sort of products because of the blockade, and they can't live a normal life because of the Israeli blockade. And Gaza as an occupied territory. And don't you think that they have a right to resist occupation? And in order for the occupation to end, don't you think that they have a right to do so?
They do have a right to do so. At the same time, had they accepted peace in the first place, we could have avoided all of this. Had cohabitation been reached to a stage where everybody could live together peacefully, there would be no need for this.
Speaker, you mentioned that there are a number of peace offers that have been made by the Israelites. What are the main demands of those peace offers that builds on the question?
I'm glad you asked that. My second speaker will allow me to finish these demands.
Further, going further on my point asked by my brother on the far right, how would the cohabitation to work?
Again, will be addressed by my second speaker.
Speaker, I just want to have one last question for you. You said, and I think this was your last argument, you said, the only way peace is accepted, the only solution is violence. Is that true?
I honestly think so. Because people, if you don't agree with somebody, approached you numerous times. I think we have reached it 1937, 1947, 1967, and the list goes on. Essentially, there's got to be a point where you got to understand that either violence is gonna happen, regardless. Thank you, sir.
No open questions for section, and after that, open questions for Sarah from the audience. Sorry, please address who you are and stand up. Stand up.
Section.
Please stand up.
Yeah, me.
Yes.
Firstly, you said that you said that all Israelis want peace and that they would agree to ceasefire. Recently, a survey that was taken, and Israel gave these statistics. 86.5% of civilians in Israel do not want to ceasefire. They want to take over the Gaza Strip. Okay. Secondly, you mentioned their land. They are fighting because they want their land. If you look at what was given to them in 1940, and if you look at what they have now, they took more than what was given to them. So what they have is not their land, it is Palestinian land. And finally, you speak about the cohabitation. If you look at why they aren't agreeing to it, if they agree to it now, it means that they're still, if they can agree to the ceasefire, they can end this war. But it means they still need to live under the conditions that they're currently living in, which means they still have to follow their Doncaster rule, which is what we have in South Africa, which is what they currently have. The Areas Act, which is what we have here, which is what they have. They also, so they can agree to a ceasefire, but what are they getting?
Thank you very much for the question.
Just to elaborate
So you're advocating fighting a war as opposed to having peace and
No.
reconstruction?
No, actually you did it. You did it, you just not used it that you
No, but you just asked the question. What are they going to do?
No. I'm not saying that.
Okay, let you answer the question.
The lady was referring to the fact that even in the instance where there is a ceasefire and they then decide to call it a truce, the Palestinians will unfavorable conditions, and she made a comparison between the conditions that were faced by our black South Africans pre-1994 with the, in inverted commas, John Pass laws, etc. So she is saying that even if we call it truce, Israel still has the upper hand because they took more than what was actually given to them.
But still, they'll have a chance at peace and rebuilding. It's a situation where if you accept peace, you have a potential future.
If they accept the status quo.
Status quo is a bit of a broad term.
If they accept,
If they accept a non-violent solution, then
a non-violent solution of Israel having the upper hand of Moab.
Can I say something about it? Thank you.
if you look at the potential that Israel actually has, in 1967, when there was an actual armed conflict, the Six-Day War, Israel did win. So Israel, as if, I know it's a bit of a contentious thing, but if you do look at it this way, Israel has the potential in order to do away with all these current, with the international community and just take over Gaza completely.
Thanks, Sergeant. Are there any questions for Israel? Israel. Oh, Palestine, sorry, Palestine. Palestine, in the States.
Oh, okay, no, it's just gonna be a general statement. On that
Sorry,
side.
can you please stand up?
No, I request to reserve my seat.
Please stand. The lady had to stand up. Please stand up.
I've just requested.
Please stand up.
Request denied. That's more than enough. It's a general statement based, perhaps, or should I say, from one of the judges by the name of I think I'm just going to have to quote based on the statement where he said Palestine is not a permanent member of what you call the United Nations.
Sorry, Mr. Tulaza, it was a question. I
Yes.
asked, is Palestine a permanent member state of the United Nations?
Yes. And what was
And
the
the lady
answer?
said, well, it's not. Did you say it's not, or? She said it's not. And what are the effects of that?
That's what I'm coming to. That's what I'm coming to. I think yes, to raise that maybe counter argument would be perhaps fallacious in a way, because quoting from a TED case where the International Criminal Court maintains that it would be a travesty of the law to raise jurisdictional immunity on those active in the deprivation of human rights and the betrayal of international justice at large. To raise perhaps territorial integrity or jurisdiction or immunity against human rights violation. So I think it will ordinarily suffice for one to establish that regardless of whether Palestine is a permanent member of the United Nations or not, but what should be the focal point is that whenever there is a gross violation of human rights, intervention is needed. I think we should be reaching common ground with it. Regardless of whether they're members or not, human rights are being violated, and a what you call active role or perhaps eradication of any sort is justified in that position. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that opinion. Can we just restrict opinions to the end of both sides have concluded because it takes time. If you have questions directly to the debaters, but thank you very much for that. Thank you. We'll have I'm sorry. So Andrew will respond, but we won't respond to opinions during the session. Only after the session will we respond to that. Andrew?
Tulaza, what you are saying, mister, is true. It is true. But you are, the angle you're trying to actually, your approach in this manner is judicial, rather. I mean, yes, legally, de jure. It should be like that, bro. It must be like that. We can't. Just because Palestine is not a permanent member state of the United Nations does not mean that we should turn our backs onto the lives of the Palestinians. But in reality, what are the effects in a political sense, in a public sense? What are the effects of the country not being the permanent member of the United Nations? Yes, we know what the law says, but what is really the effect of this? What are the effects in a public sense?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Finance, please.
Okay, so I'm just thinking that why Palestine is justifying what they are doing and why they are resisting Israel. So the first point I'm going to bring up is that Israel has become an apartheid state. It is 100% correct to call Israel an apartheid state. They have built a large wall around the areas of West Bank and Gaza Strip where the Palestinians are living. The wall is 8 meters tall and 3 meters wide, and it goes on for about 700 kilometers. On the top of this wall there's barbed wire. There are also checkpoints and roadblocks restricting the movement of Palestinians within West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now, do you believe that it is okay for people to have their freedom of movement restricted? Do you believe that we should just accept this, us as South Africans, knowing what it's like to be oppressed, knowing the history of all of the apartheid era? We shouldn't accept it so easily. You shouldn't be able to say that Israel are justified in what they're doing. Palestinians are also forbidden to use a lot of roads, and whereas Israel are allowed free movement on all of those areas. It's also been said that he said that Israel want peace, but the defense minister of Israel, his name is Matan Vilnai, actually said that he's going to visit the Holocaust on Palestine. Now, is that peace? Then the interior minister Eli Yishai also said that he's going to send Palestine back to the Middle Ages. Is that peace? And then when it comes to solutions, I think it was today after the ceasefire, Hamas also, he listed his demands. None of his demands had anything to do with removing Israel from the land. What his demands was to open the land boundaries to the Palestinians, to establish the maritime corridor and the seaport, because Palestine are restricted from all sorts of that, and to release the prisoners which have been, in fact, they've been held without trial, which is against international law. And also to grant access to Jerusalem holy sites, freedom of religion. Solutions. When it comes to solutions, I don't believe that the two-state solution will work, because it's always like Israel will never collude with Palestine. They'll never agree. They'll never agree. And it has been when Israel signed the Oslo Accord to stop building settlements, they thereafter built another 270 settlements. Okay. So I believe that the only solution is that there's a one-state solution where there's a one-man, one-vote system where all people, Israeli and Palestinian, live with equality. Success can be viewed in South Africa because we have made a successful transition from an apartheid state to a true democratic government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. We have an objection on this side, and we have an objection. Okay, so we have a question from the bench.
prior to the building of the wall, right? I can't give you an accurate figure, but there were a lot of suicide bombings that took place in Israel. And once the wall was built, there was a reduction in that. So isn't it possible to argue on the Israeli side that this wall was built to protect its civilians?
Okay, so suicide bombings, okay. With the war, it's fine, okay, to protect the civilians, but I believe that the Palestinians, it's still not correct to totally, what you call it, to totally restrict the freedom of movement. And if you remember, ANC was also called a terrorist organization. Am I right? Right? They made our constitution that we are using today. They're running the government.
A plethora of parties and individuals put together a constitution. Although the ANC was the main role player, we cannot say they're the only.
Well, you're not the only ones, but it was with their help. Yeah, so you can't just go ahead and because a few people are doing something, why block out the whole of Palestine? Why block out every Palestinian, women and children?
A question to you. Earlier on, you were speaking, it was apparent that Palestinians, unfortunately, do have the underhand. Now, my question to you is violence really the best way that Palestine can go about achieving what they are seeking? Are there any other means that Palestine can possibly look at trading along in order to achieve their imperatives?
Well, this is going on for a long time now. And so today I just listed what Hamas expects, what he wants. Okay? And these aren't unreasonable requests. But like in terms of the violence, I feel that fine, yes, it is bad. Like, there's no justification for violence anywhere in the world. But the Palestinians have no choice. The Palestinians have no choice. The UN, okay, fine, they're helping, but they have the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, but that's providing homes and doing that, which is still getting bombed by Israel. But other than that, the United Nations aren't really doing much to solve the problem. The United Nations actually condoned Israel doing all that in 1948. And even though the United Nations said that it's okay, it doesn't mean that they are correct, because they've made a number of mistakes in the past, like Bangladesh, as an example. So it's not really, you can't really say that it's correct. But in terms of the violence that I believe that they come to a point where the women and children are dying. They have no other option. They don't know what else to do. And they don't have a large military force. These children throwing stones at the soldiers. That's what it comes down to.
We will take one more question from Andrew. Speaker, you see, my focus is really on international relations. If you look at Palestine as a country, countries as they are bound by several treaties. What is political relevance? What political relevance do you, as Palestine, portray in the international sphere of politics?
Can you repeat your question?
What political relevance do you portray? Are you active enough?
Just to elaborate on my brother Judge's question, and if I may douse it down a little bit, correct me if I'm wrong. My brother Judge is asking whether Palestine is engaged with other states and sort of, I would say, created allies.
Precisely. To get these interventions to actually solve this kind of difficulty.
Well, there was, I know Egypt used to, but not anymore, not any longer. They now closed the gates to Palestine helping them. But I believe that I believe that Palestine haven't been, but they've been cut off from the rest of the world completely.
And why is that, sweetheart?
Why?
That's exactly what we're looking for. What is really the problem? Because really, if there would be an outbreak of a war in South Africa as we speak, you would see the response of the African Union. You would see the response of the United Nations, even though South Africa is not a permanent member state of the United Nations.
Well, see, I believe that that the United Nations is mostly American. Okay, the United Nations is mostly American, and America and Israel are very close allies. America actually gives Israel $8.5 million a day for their military. So obviously there will be some biasness there. Am I wrong? And just also to your first question. So your first question. Nelson Mandela himself used the military in the uprising. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's your fee?
I heard the second speaker for the Palestinian side talk about the unjustified blocking of the Gaza region, the blockading of the walls, the installation of the restriction upon that area. Now, in the Israeli government's defense, you cannot tell at a glance who is to blame for acts of terrorism, who is to blame for acts of destruction, who is an innocent victim. When the state is threatened, the only response is to restrict the movements of those you suspect of being guilty parties. Israel has been attacked numerous times, multiple times. We all know that. Everyone knows that. Southern Israel, missile attacks. Hamas has launched missiles in southern Israel, destroyed buildings, destroyed structures. Civilians have been hurt, injured, and killed on both sides. Suicide bombings, but not that's true. To illustrate my point, I will begin with the most illustrative example of acts of terrorism committed against the Israeli people. During February 1996 and March 1996, there were two incidences of bus bombings called the Jafar Road bomb incidents, in which suicide bombers killed 45 people on the first instance and another 32 on the second instance. This happened. This occurred during the time when the Oslo peace process was actually being negotiated. So this was actually a response from the Hamas government to show the intent not to comply with the Oslo peace process. And it has been said that one of the reasons that the Oslo peace process failed was that, and this is well documented fact as well, the Palestinian authorities were actively funding and supporting militant groups such as, excuse my spelling, excuse my pronunciation if I say this wrong, Al-Hassan, I don't know, sorry. The history of anti-Semitism is well documented. This is a fact. And yes, excuse me. In 2006, let's go to 2006, when Hamas first came into power. The Palestinian people, I do not feel to blame for this. I feel that the leadership of Hamas has critically jeopardized any chance of peace and negotiations and reconciliation between the Palestinians and the Israeli government. After Arafat's death in 2005, the Palestinians experienced serious turbulence in which Fatah and Hamas, Fatah and Hamas factions, were seriously in conflict. This happened in 2007. The conflict broke out, leading to Hamas taking over the Gaza Strip. In November 2007, the Annapolis Conference articulated a two-state solution. Hamas blamed Israel for not lifting the Gaza Strip blockade, and an Israeli raid that was purported to have happened through a tunnel that was done crossing into the Gaza Strip from Israel.
Just run up your arguments, yeah.
All right. Israel, in return, argued that this constituted a breach of peace. Thank you.
People have an objection from. People have a question on the bench.
This is the second speaker.
Yes.
No objection. Speaker, your first point was rather flew above my head. Please repeat that.
First point.
Yes.
My first point, my initial point was starting off from the violence instituted during the Oslo peace process. I'm sorry, forgive me. In which the Jaffa road bombings happened during February and March 1996, in which more than 45 people died. This was masterminded by Mohammed with
I have a question for you. This has to do with the 2005, the second disengagement plan. You understand that Israel obviously occupied their space. They control the waters, they control trading. I think that the same question was asked Sachin, but I think it's more relevant to you. Don't you think that this is the contributory factor why Gaza is in such disarray? Because of the current occupation. And if this occupation were to be, let's say 2014, we have another disengagement plan where we say Israel must leave Gaza, they must burn down the wall, they must allow trade to come in and come out of Gaza. Is that a possible solution that you would propose or support?
At this moment, whilst I do support it, I also feel like until such a point where a ceasefire agreement is agreed upon, where hostilities are guaranteed not to occur and retaliations not to occur, I do not feel like this is possible.
There's been 10 ceasefires for the last plus 4 weeks, and then
that's a point of example.
on both sides.
And that's a point of example. I mean, you've had the kidnapping of that Israeli soldier.
Yeah. The kidnapping of 18 Israelites and the murder of them all, and the kidnapping of one Palestinian.
Yes, if I make the point, the second speaker mentioned that thousands of Palestinians have been taken captive.
I didn't say thousands, I just said, I didn't say thousands, I said, I just said that, Hamas, wants the prisoners released who are held and, without trial.
Okay. Now, that is, prisoners actually have in fact been released. The official numbers are, let me give them to you. My sources are type this out, but my sources are everything and anyway. That's the chart's history of Israel, of that numerous article readings of the songs.
We have a question for me. Yes. There's Oslo Accord, right? From what I know, Israel never followed up on that agreement. They took more land. They ended up taking more land than they were allocated in the Oslo Accord. And so, secondly, from the time of the Oslo Accords, I don't remember a time where Israel has ever made a concession to the Palestinians without the use of violence. For example, the release of the prisoners, I think it was in 2009. The only reason the Israelis released 1,000 Palestinian prisoners was because
the Hamas had kidnapped one of their soldiers. That's the only reason that they released them. Not due to diplomacy, but because Hamas resorted to violence to kidnap. And the only reason Israel left the Gaza Strip, or they put all their settlers out of the Gaza Strip, was because they were under attack from Hamas. And so, if negotiations don't work, then what choice does Hamas have but to resort to violence?
That's a very good question. But you can say that the thing is, there's violence on both sides, and I feel there is a Japanese captain by the name of Kirabushi who once was said to quote that once war breaks out, everybody's to blame. That's just how it is. Whether or not the top tier leadership are actually in control of the troops, whether or not the troops are following the orders of their superiors, violations happen on both sides. So once one side gets bloody, the other side feels like retaliation is the only way to go. And whilst that is not progressive, that's just the reality of human nature. So,
you refer to the first point that I was looking for, where you said, where your country is being terrorized, what other option do you have? And now you then later say that once violence breaks out, everybody is to blame. I now ask you, the context of the history of this issue, whether Israel is not really the instigator of trouble.
now you see, it varies because it depends on when you look at the dates. Because if you go back, if I may, to the 6th War, even before that, to the 1933 in fact, when the Israelis were still settling in the Palestine area during the early times. There's a man. I mean, I would say was Palestinian leader back in the day. This was during the time of Hitler's violence. And at that time, he met with Islam. They had a secret meeting in Vienna to discuss whether or not Germany would come into the side of the war on Palestine side and help eradicate. So I feel like we can finger point all we want historically, and the dates keep going back and back and back and back and back, and that's just how it is in history. It's muddled and so on and so forth. So I feel like it's hard to honestly identify who is wrong and who is right.
Speaker, I have a very, very simple question. Is Israel that innocent as you portray it to be?
No.
Is it so innocent in all this?
Of course not. But neither is Palestine, I think. As I said before, everyone's to blame.
We'll have the last speaker, and we'll have to conclude the argument and the position. So, Mr. Keshe.
Thank you very much. If I may just run the house on the figures, just one more time. According to the reports of the military balance of 2014, Israel is reported to have 176,500 active soldiers, having 565 of those in Israel. Compared to how many of Palestine? Now, Hamas is considered by the Israeli people to be a terrorist group, but really, in fact, it was democratically elected by the people of Palestine to lead the people of Palestine. In times of war, many groups have been considered to be terrorist groups. But just because we, as the opposing, or you as the opposing side of Israel, does not recognize the authenticity of the group that has been elected to lead the people of Palestine, does that give you a right to just barge in there and just basically tear them to pieces? To run on the death toll just one more time, it is recorded that 1,886 of Palestinians have been reported to be killed, with more than 350 of those being school children, compared to 63, that is less than 100, of soldiers belonging to Israel. Now, if you may remember correctly, a war is where soldiers go against soldiers. It ceases to be a war the moment you don't go to soldiers and bomb schools, and bomb UN safe houses, bomb where innocent people are at. That is no longer war. It's plain like murder. A battle plan that is proposed by Israel is a battle plan that includes bombing schools and bombing UN safe houses. Where is the solution to that? You are proposing a solution that says that it's either Palestine just sits down and let you take over, or war is going to erupt. Just because you have a military group that is ranked 34 largest in the whole world does not justify you bombing schools, bombing UN safe houses, bombing innocent civilians, for that matter. Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel purported to defend their actions by saying that Hamas uses people to protect their bombs, whereas Israel uses bombs to protect their people. It's a fact. Israel does have the 34th largest military service in the world, but that does not justify the killings. Does it really? Does it really justify the innocent bombing of civilians? The solution to the problem that is facing Israel and Palestine will not be achieved when Israel is continuing to kill innocent civilians. In a time of war, soldiers go against each other. They know the coordinates of the school. Their military group is so advanced that they know the coordinates of every single thing that they're bombing. So the 17 GPS coordinates that were given to bomb the schools that they bombed cannot be purported to be a mistake. They knew very well that there was a school with school children, innocent civilians, but they go inside anyway and bomb it. They go ahead and bomb the UN safe houses, the little help that the United Nations is trying to give to the displaced Palestinian people. The Israelis go ahead and bomb those houses as well. Do you really think we're going to reach a conscionable solution to that problem when Israel purports to kill all Israeli people? We can definitely liken this to the situation in South Africa during apartheid. Never was it ever heard that the actions of the organizations like the ANC were justified. But what are you supposed to do when you have the 34th largest military group going ahead you? Are we really expecting the Palestinian people to just sit back and let Israel take over? Israeli people, we are saying, the Palestinian people deserve the right to self-determination just as much as the Israeli people deserve. So we are proposing, and as Mohammed alluded earlier, that we are proposing an amicable solution to all of this. And that is not going to be reached when Israel is still bombing schools and safe houses. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have an objection from the opposite side, and we'll have questions from the bench.
My objection is, all that is well and good, but as you said, war is supposed to be when soldiers fight against soldiers. That's what established, that is well known. But now, it gets a bit blurry when the soldiers are wearing school uniforms, or the soldiers are being press gagged. The soldiers are being pulled from schoolyards by Hamas militants, being indoctrinated, and then sent out to go bomb innocent civilians. These are not soldiers that are attacking these institutions. These are not soldiers attacking soldiers. This is school children, little kids, men and women that are still young, going forth with those suicide vests and going on suicide bombing various areas. Is that really war?
Can we just establish the fact that Palestinian civilians have been killed? Do you agree on that?
I agree just as much as the fact that Israeli civilians have been killed.
So I heard responsible. Okay. The question I want to ask you is in relation to what you said, that war is between soldiers and soldiers. On the 2nd of July, there was an Israeli raid which killed 7 Hamas soldiers. Khan Yunus offered a statement that saying, well, this is really bad that has happened, and what Israel has done has legitimized us killing all Israeli civilians. Now, that's in a contradiction to what you just said. This is a leader of Hamas just said. Are you going to answer? Mohammed?
All I'm going to say is that there were only 3 Israeli civilians killed.
I think Palestine team, the question is, was the statement made by the person referred to one that indicates a civilians.
It really boils down to the proportionality of all of this.
Civilians?
It really does boils down to the proportion of all of
The
this.
proportionality of killing civilians, how are you proposing?
Killing civilians or killing militant soldiers.
What is your angle of justification? We are saying that we have a Hamas leader that has now gone and said, they killed our soldiers. We're going to go in and kill the civilians.
It is a state of war. Palestinian is the underdog.
But that's now
What do you
contradictory
expect
to
do?
what you've just said, that war is when soldiers go against soldiers.
How many civilians belonging to Palestine were killed by Israel?
So now we subjectify your statement when we come to Palestine, but we objectify it when it comes to Israel.
It does boils down to proportionality, which justifies the subjectivity of this whole statement.
With regards to Palestine,
Yes.
than opposed to Israel.
Yes.
Thank you, so we'll have questions on this first one.
I wanted to ask him that Hamas firing rockets at indiscriminately at innocent civilians constitutes a war crime. And secondly, Palestine is an observer, has observer status within the United Nations. So if they wanted Israel to be held accountable for the alleged crimes that they've committed in Gaza, they would have to ratify the ICC statute, the International Criminal Court statute, the Rome statute,
Yes.
for there to be an investigation with whatever happened in Gaza, right? And I want to know, why doesn't Palestine ratify that statute so the Israelis can be held accountable for the alleged war crimes that they've been committed in Gaza?
Having observer status in the United Nations as Palestine does, really does place it in a lesser position than the rest of the member states of the United Nations. So right now, the problems that are facing Palestine, in a way, in a sense, outweigh their opportunity to get to ratify the Rome Statutes. With all of this conflict going on, never has it ever occurred at that particular time for the Palestinian people to ratify the Rome Statutes. It will be, as you say, I fully agree to that, it will be easier for the United Nations to use its resources to actually hold Israel accountable for the actions that they've done. But in the midst of all of this, where will Palestinian people get time to do this?
They have a representative at the United Nations in Geneva who can do this. He's not in Palestine.
He's alive.
For now.